This is a Marketing for Learning podcast, the only podcast in the world that's guaranteed to increase your knowledge, skills, and capabilities when it comes to marketing for learning. Plus, there's a gratuitous amount of pineapples. You're welcome. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Marketing for Learning podcast. I have quite a little snack for your ear holes today. I am joined by Sarah Hatton, who is the Chief Learning Officer at the LPI, or the Learning and Performance Institute. And today we're going to be discussing the recent LPI survey that was announced, a learning survey announced last week or the week before. Over 1,500 people were surveyed, so we've got a fantastic body of data to discuss. And I really wanted to get Sarah on to just talk about the LPI's perspective on what's changing in our industry, but also the direction of travel for learning and development and what we really need to do as a function to stay future focused. Sarah, thank you so much for giving me your time. I know you're very busy.
No, that's great. It's really good to be talking to you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So obviously, I've already said you're a CLO at the LPI, but I know you've actually worked in quite a lot of different learning roles. I don't know if you, for those that don't know, you aren't familiar with your career. What's your kind of background? Have you always had a learning background, or what's your career trajectory been?
Yeah, so I think once you start to put a number on it, it makes me feel like I've been working for a really long time. And someone said more than 2 decades sounds better than 20 years. I think slice and dice it, it comes to the same thing. But yeah, more than 2 decades in and amongst the world of learning, talent, OD, and been in various different, there's been no rhyme or reason to the particular industry that I've been in. So I've gone from food to cars to television, but always in and amongst learning, talent, people, and how can we get the best out of the people and high performing teams. So coaching is a passion, mentoring, just helping and watching people develop and succeed. So yeah, very much people at the heart of everything I've done. And then come almost full circle, I started life in consultancy way back when, but actually then now to be the Chief Learning Officer at the LPI and to bring not only my experience, but to really just spend my days talking to other heads of learning, learning managers, people in learning, and just seeing what works, what doesn't work, what are the challenges, and how can we all collectively come together as a community and help make learning work and create meaningful learning experiences.
And I think that bird's eye view that you now have, kind of in that culmination of your career, and now the LPI is more of a kind of objective organizational body that isn't, kind of so I guess in the weeds with the learning, as it were. You're not procuring LXPs and the such like. And I think that bird's eye view gives a really different lens on what's going on with our industry, what's changing and things like that. So that's what I really wanted to dig in with you today. So first of all, let's give some context. People, people may or may not be familiar with the survey. They might have read it, they might not. For those that haven't, what is the learning survey? Why did you guys create it?
Yeah, so actually we did used to do one. We used to do one every year. I think it was up until about 2015. And in 2015, we stopped doing what was then also called the Learning Survey and transitioned more into a research companion where we collated other pieces of content and curated other research and commented on it. But somehow this year feels like life is different. There's a lot going on in and amongst the world of L&D, not least because of AI in particular, causing quite a lot of disruption and noise, but also very much that future. What is the future looking like? What do we need to do? And how can we help those out there facing a lot of the same challenges come to terms with kind of where we currently are, but also what do we need to do to get ourselves ready for the future? So now felt like a really good time to go back out and survey the profession, the population, and just try and find out a little bit more from a sentiment point of view. We actually intentionally asked some fairly challenging emotional questions just to get a real pulse of what the profession is feeling here and now, a snapshot in time, in and amongst the craziness of the AI in particular that's going on around us.
Yeah, because I think it's a different lens of survey. Like a lot of the ones I see are usually vendor led for a start, which means that there's typically some sort of
Mhm.
either very direct or indirect agenda that sits underneath this. Whereas this very much seemed like more emotional sentiment, but also just a kind of gauge of like, where are you guys at and what are you guys doing? And so it's not like product focused or anything like that. So to me, it just felt a little bit more objective as a consequence of that. And given that there's such a spread and cross section of people, I love that out of the 1,500 odd people that responded, you've actually cross sectioned it even further into leaders, team members, even vendors, and
Yeah.
so you've kind of highlighted those different opinions and allowed us to kind of see the world through their different perspectives and lenses, which I
Mhm.
thought
And
was
consultants as
a
well. So
unique.
I think it was getting the
Mm,
consultants view. It was just to really get that full picture. So, yes, not a lot of in-depth answers that have come out per se, but that wasn't the objective. It was just much
yeah.
more to get that snapshot in time and just to see where we are and see how people are feeling about the current reality and the future as well. But yeah, I agree. I think it's come at it very much, let's look at all the community groups and make sure that all voices are included.
Yeah, I love that angle. So let's, what a great natural segue. You said, let's talk, the state of things as they are. One of the early bits of information that just absolutely floored me when I was reading through I mean, it's 74 pages, guys, and I will put it in the show notes. So we're not going to talk through the entire report today, as I expect you can understand. Just things that have really caught my attention, I find particularly interesting. Of those surveyed, only 1% said that their learning strategy is working perfectly. And 53% said it's mostly not working, and 5.5% said it's a complete mess. So, quite a big chunk of our industry, first and foremost, if we're talking about the state of play as it stands right now, are essentially saying what we're doing isn't working.
Mhm.
I mean, I have my own opinions also, but I'd be curious to know what's your gut punch or your hot take on why.
So, so look, I think sadly the reality is that for a lot of people, we still aren't aligning our learning strategy to our organizational strategy. We
Yeah.
do know that we should be, but for whatever reason, that just doesn't seem to be happening. And so then if it's done in isolation, it possibly isn't so surprising that your learning strategy isn't working because learning is still quite narrow focused. We're focused on what do we think people should learn. But if that's not connected to the overall business strategy, and we're then not trying to look at driving overall performance, then learning on its own isn't going to be having as great an impact as it needs to be. We're in
Mm.
2024, right? Like we can't just be focused on is this class working? Is this content working? Is learning working? Learning
Yeah. Did
is
people like it?
yeah. Yes, I had a nice time. And we talk about it knowing that's not the right thing, yet for whatever reason, we still are then out there trying to do our learning strategy in isolation, which probably is the reason that it isn't working. And yet that is then also coupled with people say that we don't have time. So if we don't have time, then again, my learning strategy is not going to work. Yet again, you and I both know we make time for what we want to make time for. So how can learning really feed into what it is that people are wanting, but not just people are wanting bottom up, but top down? What does the organization want? So we're kind of missing both ends of the reality of what's going on, I think.
Mm. Well, because that was my thought when I read that question. And is it working? Who for? Right? Is it working for your learners? Is it working for the organization? How much do those two things overlap?
Mm,
That's why I find the research that Serena Gonçalves Fish has done really interesting because she's basically done a huge amount of research on high impact learning
mm,
development functions and what they are doing that those that aren't basically and linking to business objectives is one of the clear strategic items that she pushes heavily in terms of L&D that is successful is pretty much driven by the organization, right? And that I think is where we sometimes miss the mark. We still don't quite understand that we service the business.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst that doesn't mean we have to be a cost center, another question that is covered in the survey, so go have a read of it, please. It is more about actually how is about the value or even the perceived value of learning and development in the organization. But if we're not able to say, well, hey, we did this, we spent X amount and we did X, Y, and Z from a learning perspective, and that resulted in X decrease in employee turnover or X decrease in risk in these three quantifiable ways, it does then just force learning to become this fluffy, intangible thing in our world. And of course, the business is not seeing value. Learners aren't seeing value. And I would hazard a guess that's why, again, one of your survey questions covers budgets, and most budgets are staying the same or declining. So that to me kind of pretty much confirms that, like, if it's not successful for the business, then it's certainly not
Yeah.
going to
Well,
retain
and
its
it's not going to be successful
kind
if
of
we're not asking the right questions, getting to the root cause of what they're actually wanting. So then it becomes a
yeah.
sticky plaster, quick fix, but it is a cost because it's not addressing the right thing. So that sticky plaster will fall off, and we haven't actually, created something that's going to drive true performance. So we need to really be changing the conversations into thinking about that performance consulting approach, but then even a step beyond that, what do you want people to do differently? What's the impact? How does that really drive true business outcomes and business objectives? And how can we actually be having the same conversations using the language of the business rather than still talking about a lot of what we talk about, which becomes the cost? How much did it cost? How many training classes have we delivered? How many people have been on it? Into much more, what is the investment to the business? Why are we doing this? And we're doing it ultimately for the same reasons that the business are doing it. So yeah, I absolutely I think we're both saying the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise to see this number, but 1% is, it's horrifying. It's so low. And why is the reality still that we are working in our little siloed islands? We need to do better.
We do. We need to talk to the business so much more, because we do a lot of discovery at Mass, obviously, and we work with all different types of clients and all different types of sectors. One thing comes out all the time is when we're speaking to employees. I always ask at the end, like, what's one thing you would change about L&D at X? And the things that people say, it's like they need to talk to us more. Like, someone actually said that on a call I had last week, and they were like, they need to be doing exactly what you're doing with us right now. They need to talk to us. And I thought it was quite funny. The question, how satisfied do you think employees are with the quality of your L&D programs? Managers said, about 75% of managers said that employees are mostly satisfied, and 70% of leaders said that employees are mostly satisfied. I can tell you, based on the conversations that I've had, the hours and hours and hours of discovery speaking directly to employees, is that that's not true. So again, like, you talk about working in silo and not talking to the business and not engaging stakeholders. I think we do a really poor job of actually accurately representing the sentiment of our employees within our organization as well. We have a tendency to think that learning is really freaking special and everyone loves it, whereas actually, great that you have put a lot of energy and effort into your training programs or your blended programs, and you've got loads of cool resources and asset libraries and content libraries that give people a really robust learning offering. But that doesn't mean that people see value in that still, and that doesn't mean that, like, they're actually genuinely, like, satisfied with what's available to them. I'll pick up on this a little bit more a bit later, but I don't know, do you agree with that like 75-80% of employees are happy with their learning programs? Because I just think that's mad.
Well, I do, but I think I've learnt this from you as well. What's in it for me? And if we're not asking people and we're doing it to them, then I don't understand. It's not surprising that they're not satisfied, but we're still probably thinking, well, we've come up broadly. We broadly have touched on what they've asked for. They've come to us and asked for I don't know, empathy training, but we haven't, again, we've gone off and we've designed our version of what we think empathy should be, but that doesn't mean that someone's actually going to do something different as a result of it. So we're doing it still in isolation. And I think that's probably where we're falling down a little. So
Mm.
if we're then finding ourselves in the middle where we're not aligning to business or organizational objectives, so we're not understanding it from top down, but we're also not out there speaking to employees about, well, what do you truly want to get out of this? What's going to make a difference to you? What are you going to do differently? Then yeah, we're
We're in
setting
an echo
ourselves up
chamber of our own opinions,
of
and
our own.
that's it.
At least if we could align to one of them, we could be like, do you know what? We really truly are catering for the business, and we're doing, but we're not doing either of them well. Which we do. It's I don't know why, because we know it, we talk about it, and we all, I would say, I think impact is a word that no one listening to this is going to be surprised about. We all know we're doing this because we want to drive greater impact. Yet then we still find ourselves, I guess, do we use the excuse that we're busy? Do we go off and we just start designing in isolation? I don't know the actual where it falls apart, but we tend to not take that step back and just give ourselves that permission to move away from that role of order taker, I suppose, to at least question, challenge, really make sure that what we're doing is the right solution for the right problem and addressing, what do your employees actually want from you?
Yeah. I don't think we do half enough root cause analysis work, for
Mm,
example.
yeah.
We have problems that we're encountering and we tend to veneer over them with new tech, additional content libraries. Like one of my clients at the moment, their employees express clear gratitude and understanding that what they're being offered by their employee is very broad and very valuable and very useful, but they don't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
So, not on top of like, okay, we've got all this stuff, but we don't really know if it's meeting a business need or a learner need. So many employees say to me, I don't know where to start. Like, how do I, there was personalization question
Mm.
again in the survey. Let me just dig out the stats because I thought it was quite an interesting one. But essentially, we're not doing very well at personalization. And I would say that that's pretty much echoed through the conversations that I'm having with employees, in that most of the time they say that, here we go. So about over 70% are saying that their personalization in learning isn't great. Some personalized content, but a lot of it's generic. And that again, I think is absolutely linked with the lack of success in business strategy, a decline in budgets, because ultimately what I'm hearing from employees is, what do I do with all this stuff? Like, cool that there's loads of soft skill training from LinkedIn Learning and Udemy and Coursera has all great. I've got all that. Cool that I've got these leadership and management programs that I can potentially go on that are blended and a bit more face to face or whatever. If I want to take the next step in my career, where does what step is that?
Mm.
Where what skills do I need? What does my organization need to recognize as a skill set in me to take that next step up from account executive to account manager or whatever? That comes up time and time again. There's no clear routes and pathways. And I know the amount of work that would genuinely take to build out personalized learning pathways for each job that a person does in that business. But imagine if we had that and you could actually say, you want to move up, go and do this. You want to move over or sideways, these are the sort of skills that the business really values and recognizes. There's not often, in my experience, a huge amount of steer in terms of the business values this skill set. These are the areas that you should focus on. So they're very good at saying, we really want you to commit to lifelong learning, and learning is one of our core values, and you should really be learning all the time, and it's really important. But where does that anchor in with how it's relevant for the individual, and how do you actually root that into the what's in it for me if there's no personalization or no kind of, it is just a world of Netflix and Disney Plus and Prime all put together into one amalgamated blob, and people are just expected to know how to navigate that. It's really, really, really quarrelsome.
Well, and then it becomes a minefield because there is so much out there. And I think actually just in those two things that you've described, you've got we want to commit to a life, a culture of lifelong learning. And, I can learn something on Netflix by watching a documentary. I can learn something on TikTok in 15 seconds that I didn't know before. So how can you also utilize some of this? I'm learning all the time, but we still don't associate that with workplace learning. Yet then we're also then still not providing that progression from a pure skills from A to B. And, how do what are the actual skills I need to do my job? So I guess for me, if I can try and bucket it out almost into three different segments, I think what we need to be trying to focus on more is what's my training segment? What are the skills I need to do my job? And that should be more prescriptive where it needs to be. What are the skills required from in this job family? What are the skills required in that job family? And how can you help me get those? But then I think there are two others which are slightly different. I think then there's the learning bucket, which is that what are all these other contributing factors that are just helping me learn and grow and observe from others and behaviors, and then I think my third one on top of that is my development. So how am I using these all combined to really develop within an organization, develop myself, develop others? And again, I think all too often when we talk about our learning strategy, we're focusing probably a little bit too much still on two out of those three, and probably a little bit too much, even if we're honest with ourselves, on the training component. And we really need to move again much more further forward away from it's so much more than training. What is the performance? What are people going to be doing? And then ultimately, so again, it's back to that, what is the impact that we're having? And without personalization, you can't personalize 10,000, 100,000 to know, whatever the size of your organization. But how can we ensure that all content connects, it's relevant, and really is just creating that what matters to people and putting them at the heart of what we're doing?
Yeah, I think that curation piece is so important if you do have a massive libraries, because people just, they don't know where to start. And if you've got an LXP, the UI is still not great. And I've seen some clients try and circumvent that with like SharePoint pages or specific pages on the LXP, but people still don't know to go there. So then it becomes this like, it's such a big thing that, if you have time to do learning, which a lot of people just don't, they have other priorities, and business priorities will always come first. But if they do feel like they have some time, they spend it or waste it trying to just find something that they want to learn, rather than the business saying, right, these are the 10 skills that we want our business to focus on this year, whatever they might be, right? At least give somebody some freaking steer, because otherwise they just don't know. They don't know
But
what
it's
to
the same,
do with
isn't
it.
it? Like, I don't know about you, but it's like, think of any song, and all of a sudden you're like, my head is full of a million songs. I can't just pick a song to start my algorithm. And then I always just default back to the same one or two. And I'm like, no, don't default back to the same one or two. There are millions of songs that you could go to. And we do the same. We're like, here's so much content. Off you go. The world is your
But
oyster.
where's the context for that content, right? And I think
And
that's
you
the
get,
piece.
so why? What's in it for me? Why? Why should this particular one be of, interest and value to me?
Yeah. If learning doesn't link back to the job role that they're doing, or the job role they're aspiring to do, and then that doesn't link back to some sort of business or performance objectives, the learning will fail, or you will see low engagement, because it doesn't matter how good all the product offering is. If those things just don't align or are quite disjointed, I think you often find that it's not able to connect with people. That personalization piece is gone, that context is missing. There's just too much stuff. Which kind of segues nicely into the last bit that I want to discuss with you from the survey. And as I said, guys, the survey is really big, so I'll put it in the show notes. If you want to read the full thing, you can go bananas. I've given you the kind of the cliff notes and things that piqued my interest or got an emotional response from me. We obviously have talked about engagement, people not seeing things and stuff like that. This is a Marketing for Learning podcast. It would be remiss of me to not discuss the marketing elements that were highlighted in the survey. Obviously, I know the LPI's capability map regularly surfaces marketing and communications as one of the most essential skills that L&D needs, but it always sadly sits at the very bottom I think it's always number 20.
Yeah.
It's never really kind of going anywhere. We're working really hard on trying to educate and empower with the podcast and all the other resources that we do from Mass. But I thought it was really interesting that you guys actually asked a couple of questions that pertain specifically to learning. Sorry, to marketing, not learning. Duh, most of it's to do with learning. Number one was, if you could recruit one additional skill in your team, what would it be? Marketing came second, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Mm.
That just closely follows AI. So AI, obviously, as you rightly said at the beginning, just completely disrupting and making a lot of noise. But let's dig into the marketing piece a little bit. So why? I mean, I'm delighted to see that it's certainly a skill that people are now wanting on their team. Because I would say a few years ago, I'm not even sure people would have recognized that maybe marketing is something that they should be doing. So, what's your kind of take on that? Is there any insights that you have from previous capability maps or anything in terms of maybe why there's finally a gear shift in recognizing that marketing does need to happen in order for a learning function to be successful?
Yeah, so again, I think it probably is. I think people probably still think, and I obviously I don't want I don't want to put the thought into people's head, but I still think, again, all too often we're so busy and where we're operating in small teams, and we've just discussed that we're not out in the business trying to really identify the real root cause of the problem. So we then go off, we design, we create, we have a huge amount of content on a program, and we still see things in isolation. So we go and we do a big publicity announcement, or we're on a town hall, or whatever it might be for a particular organization on, hey, here's our new manager program, come to it. And then it falls off because the next shiny thing comes along. But we're operating still then much more in that traditional L&D way of working, where your focus is on the learning needs of people, not the performance needs or organizational outcomes. We're viewing the training as the event, measuring success of the event, again, rather than really pushing it forward to what's the performance, how have people actually behaved differently. And I guess that's where actually people are now starting to see that skill of marketing in the same way, as if we are just marketing once, thinking, okay, we've marketed that, we can move on. That's not going to change behaviors. It keeps it as a one-off, one-time instance. Whereas hopefully people are starting to realize, through the fabulous work that Mass does, through your conversations, but also from their own, in order to drive impact, you can't just tell people about something once. The world is busy. Everyone's busy. There's so much noise. We've got so many places to go that it has to be that continual, how am I continuing to communicate? Keep telling people, what is it, 7 times, 10 times? I don't know, but tell people, tell them again, keep marketing the same information back. And I think that actually it's not a surprise that people have started to realize that, no, that's not a skill that we've got in L&D. There's a marketing department that do it. And maybe we've always thought about it inadvertently in, okay, let's at least brand everything with the same logo so people know this has come out from us. But again, I don't know that
But is that a
employees,
vanity project because we want the
well,
recognition rather
well, then
than
exactly. And that's not actually going to drive. I don't think employees, if something's come from HR or an ERG or from a diversity team, they don't care who it's come from. It's, what can I learn from this? How can it help me? And how can it help me in my workplace? So we need to do a much better job of marketing the full circle. And I think that's probably why people are saying, yeah, in and amongst all this noise, marketing is the skill we need, because otherwise it's just getting lost. I don't know
yeah.
if you would agree with that.
Yeah, no, I think it's certainly, I reckon if you'd asked that question maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like before I launched Mass, I was kind of like, like, are people even gonna really like agree with me that marketing is a thing? And like,
Mm.
I think there has been a significant shift, and I certainly am not saying that that's everything that we're doing, but I think we've certainly played a role. But I do think it is more actually this genuine and sincere recognition. Like, we do things like spaced repetition, learning, learning theory, people need to see things regularly to have their memory refreshed. Like that is literally what marketing campaigns do.
Yeah.
Keeping front of mind and staying fresh in people's heads. Yes, you change the language. Yes, you adjust the messaging. Yes, the visuals adapt and change. But the message and the sentiment that sits underneath all of that should be very much around keeping front of mind. And what you were alluding to was the rule of seven. So that's like old marketing theory that started in the 20s, that someone needed to see an advert or a billboard like 7 times at least before they'd even recall the brand or buy your product. So, there's again significant research now behind how people remember and recall. And the only way for people to really remember what you're saying and what you're doing is to be visible, because not everyone sees every single Yammer post you put out or email that you send. That's just not how it works. So it is a numbers game as much as anything else. So that single email that you send out, you're doing yourself a significant disservice actually, because not everyone's going to see the email, and those that do, 10% are going to open it, maybe another 5% will read it, so on and so forth. So you're working with such tiny little numbers by the end of it. The last question I want to dig
I was just going to
into,
add one more thing.
sorry,
And
did you have something you
I
want to
wonder
add?
whether we were doing it, but we just didn't think about it as marketing. So this will probably make you laugh. But one of the first things that I was given as a project piece of work to work on, it was called the toilet paper. And it was literally your calendar of events that went on the back of the toilet door cubicles to remind people of what was going on. And it only ever got refreshed once a month, because you would refresh the next month's activities. And that probably was marketing, but we didn't call it marketing for learning at the time. It was more, and again, when people were in the office, it was, how can you have posters around, or how can you have things on people's trays if they were going to a communal food area? But just again, that constant reminder of training. But to me, it was always an event. It was, okay, let's have so many posters that advertise this particular manager course or this particular thing that we're doing. And I think, again, what we didn't talk about, and we need to talk about more, is, but how does that still fit into the bigger picture? Why is this important to the business and important to you at this particular time? And how do we continue to cut through the noise with all of these different things and actually put it into a marketing strategy, rather than just, again, lots of different activities happening in isolation? But yeah, I had to write the toilet paper for the back of the toilet door.
Well, you have a captive audience.
Well, yeah.
When I launched a learning tech provider whose name shall not be mentioned, obviously, but when I did that, we put loads of posters on the back of toilets at Learn Tech. You weren't supposed to, but you got a captive audience there. Like they got nowhere else to look, and they're looking for someone to read. So I think that you're absolutely right that that is marketing. And actually what you're alluding to is, branding messaging versus campaigns that maybe push your products. Han just actually did a podcast around hum sing shout as a marketing strategy theory, and it kind of touches on that. So having a consistent cadence of brand messaging that's then supplemented with your products, in inverted commas, which is essentially your learning programs and things like that. I'm just conscious that I made us a bit late today, guys, so we don't have as much time to talk as we normally would. But I wanted to just laugh with you about the final bit, which was the final question I wanted to highlight. How are you at marketing L&D to the business? I tell you what, we think we're great. Managers, we're okay at marketing facilitated training courses or events. Nearly 50% of managers believe that L&D is okay at doing marketing. Again, I would welcome your thoughts, but based on the conversations I'm having directly with employees, and also on what I see when my clients show me the communications and the marketing that they are doing, we're not okay at this. Mostly because of what you just alluded to. We're not doing consistency. We don't have often a consistent look and feel. I see a lot of Frankenstein imagery here, there, and everywhere. But I don't know. We're trying, aren't we? We're starting somewhere. But I think, given that now marketing is a skill that's being recognized as something that we start wanting in the business, that to me signifies a significant shift in how we do marketing, actually, because people are understanding that there's more to it than the toilet paper change.
Yeah, and so I think I'll probably be saying the same as you in a slightly different way, but I think we think we're doing it because we're doing activities. But I think actually what we're not doing is the strategy. So actually having it as a
Yeah.
separate, well, separate but integrated. You've got your L&D strategy, but you need your marketing strategy that's alongside part of that. So I think probably managers think that we're okay at doing it because, yeah, we are doing this and we are doing that, and we're remembering to remind people more than once. But what we haven't got is, are we using our audience to market? Have we got peer referral? Have we got somewhere in our strategy to come back and check back in with, people who've already done it, because they can become an advocate? And so I don't think actually, from the conversations I'm having as well, that we're doing it as a well thought out, planned marketing strategy. We're doing pieces of activity and pieces of work, which may be working and it's better than doing nothing. But how can we again push it more into a direction of aligning org strategy, L&D strategy, marketing strategy, all single thread throughout.
And in that order too.
Yeah,
absolutely, in that order. That is a hierarchy that should be in place. Org strat, biz strat, sorry, biz and org strat, L&D strat, marketing strat, and all those things should be feeding into the marketing strat. I often speak to people who just don't even have a learning strat, and I'm like, whoa, what can I do for you? Like, you need to do that bit first before we can help you with that. So yeah, I think we're on the same page. But hey, look, this has been a whistle stop conversation. I've loved digging into the survey. I love data. And I thought there was just some really interesting sentiment that was unearthed. So, thank you so much to the LPI for taking the time to even do the survey and collating all of that. I know how much work it truly is to get raw data and make it make sense and tell a story around it. So thank you, Sarah, for giving me your time. I know you're really busy.
No, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. Can people find you? Where can they find you if they want to chat to you a little bit more, or just find out anything else about this survey?
All the usual places, although probably not quite as much as the Twitter. LinkedIn's always a good place to start. So Sarah Hatton, FLPI at LinkedIn, email, come through you. We're connected to a lot of the same people, but yeah, would love to reach out and carry on the conversation.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, I'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well, just so it's there so people can find it if they want to chat. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your inaugural visit to the Marketing for Learning podcast. Hopefully it's not the last one.
Oh, I hope I'll be back soon. Thank you.
I will. See you later. Bye.